and thank you for tuning in to Starting Small. Today, I'm joined by Nick Stone of Bluestone Lane. Nick, thank you so much for joining me today.
Cameron, thank you. Glad to be on and looking forward to the chat.
Of course. Before we get started, I must say, when I lived in LA last year, and right next to my office where I worked was a Bluestone Lane. And I went in there almost every day before I would go into the office, like 2 hours before. I would grind out some work, get ready for the work day, and enjoy a hot chocolate. So I'm a huge fan.
Oh, great. Whereabouts? Which location, or where were you located?
Yep. So that was on Wilshire and San Vicente.
Yeah, no. Well, so you're at probably a Brentwood location.
Brentwood. Yep.
Yeah, that's a nice looking store actually. A bit of a tranquil environment. Nice way to start the day, and
Definitely.
that's why we created this company, to provide you those sort of moments, that reprieve, that daily escape where you could come in, get yourself ready, and then head off to work or to the gym or home or whatever's on your day.
I love it. Incredible. Well, yeah, to flashback then, let's get started with your upbringing. I'm curious, where did you grow up and what would you say your childhood was like?
I grew up in Melbourne, Australia. Had a great childhood. Have one sibling, my brother Andrew, who I have the fortune of work with at Bluestone Lane.
Hmm.
Grew up in a suburb, close to the water, the bay that is in Melbourne, and yeah, played a lot of sport. Had lots of friends. Love socializing. Love exploring. Love adventures. So really wonderful parents. So yeah, I was very very fortunate to grow up in Australia. I think it is such an extraordinary country, and
Yep.
Melbourne in particular, one of the most livable, if not the most livable cities in the world. So
Hmm.
sporting obsessed, culinary, hospitality obsessed, arts obsessed. So really sort of great melting pot to learn and try different things.
Amazing. I'd love to hear about some of your interests and aspirations at that young age. I saw you were very involved with football. If you can kind of elaborate on that and what led to that interest.
Yeah, I played a lot of Australian rules football growing up. My family, I had an uncle who played professionally, and my father was a very good player, and my grandfather. So it was in the DNA, and I grew up watching a lot of footy and playing obsessively. And yeah, I guess I probably in my late teens realized that maybe there's a chance that I could make it professionally. I was never a certainty, but in my last year of high school, I ended up being selected in the National Australian Football League draft,
Wow.
and I ended up playing 6 seasons professionally. So from the age of 17 to 23. So you get drafted typically in high school. You don't go through a college feeder system.
Yep.
And 3 teams, 2 years at each, very much a journeyman. But fortunately, all teams were in Melbourne, which is an interesting thing. Australian rules football is the Indigenous football code, the most popular code, the most heavily attended,
Mm.
and very lucky to stay in Melbourne instead of sort of relocate. So
Yeah.
I didn't have any disruption with my study. I went to university at the same time,
Wow.
and yeah, that was my first career. So that started at 17, finished at 23.
That's incredible. How did you keep that determination to go through the university at that time? And were those classes in person at all while you were traveling, or what did that look like?
Yeah, yeah. No, I studied part time 6 years.
Okay.
So finished my degree just as my final contract was being it was elected to not be renewed.
Mm.
So it was incredible, and the transferable skills from playing professional sport are extraordinary at such a young age too. So
Mm.
playing in front of 50, 60, 80,000 people, living out your childhood dream, walking from school into suddenly a professional environment.
Mm.
The legal driving age in Australia is 18, so I got drafted and I didn't have a car, I didn't have my license, so my father dropped me off to training, and suddenly you're training with your heroes.
Wow.
It was just extraordinary to learn about how to find a next level, how to improve that continuous improvement mentality, innovation, resilience. It was just extraordinary, so formative, and
Mm.
those those skills and those values have really translated well into the next two careers I've had, including the one right now as founder and CEO of Bluestone. So yeah, I've always juggled a couple of things at the same time. So I
Yep.
played AFL football, went to uni. Then when I was a banker, I went to postgraduate, did my masters, then started my MBA, and then I was working in banking in New York, and I started Bluestone on the side. So I think I've just
Wow.
always been interested in juggling and trying my best and keeping busy. Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
fun.
I would love to hear through the progression of once you were done with soccer or football at this time, and then going to grad school. What were some of your aspirations to get into? You mentioned baking. Is that what you wanted to do prior to becoming an entrepreneur, for example?
Yeah, I was really interested in working overseas, and I
Hmm.
thought working in financial services in the financial markets provides you that opportunity. And I was always quite enamored with working in New York or working in London, Hong Kong. I'd had the chance to visit the UK on a cricket tour actually when I was at school,
Mm,
and I just love being in these larger cities. And obviously, a lot of Australians have this scratch about, oh, sorry, this itch to scratch, uh, because Australia is geographically so far south.
mm,
It's just part of your DNA. It's almost a right you have to go and chance your arm with the world and explore. And I just always thought that wouldn't it be an amazing thing to be able to work overseas, live in a foreign place, experience all of these
yep.
different cultures and activities that come with a new environment. So that banking for me, I was really interested in with because the sophistication and insights and the diversity with the different companies you'll be working with. You get
Mm,
to work overseas, and then the compensation's good. If you do a good job, then you earn enough to provide for your family and
yep.
have opportunities to holiday and things like that. So it's
Yep.
sort of just I didn't really. I had an uncle that worked in financial services, but the rest of my family were not bankers or accountants. They were all primarily in small business, either in development or construction development, or in professional services, or my grandfather was a butcher, and my other grandfather was in retail, and then in sales. So
Wow.
it just to but my uncle definitely had an influence on me at a young age, that he had moved from Melbourne to live in Sydney, and yeah, I always just
Mm,
thought that this could be a really great career choice.
amazing. So you mentioned Bluestone was kind of like in this realm of while you're banking as well. I'm curious, what got you fascinated with like coffee? Were you high caffeine intake because of your job? What was that like to get into that adventure?
Well, I had no background in coffee. I was a complete outsider. I
Mm,
had very limited knowledge about how to make a great coffee and the process that goes into it and the discipline. However, when I moved to the US, I was just so shocked by a couple of things. Firstly, that the consumption level is so high,
mm,
and that there was so much success with Starbucks, a brand that had failed in Australia. They had tried to enter Australia and was unsuccessful.
mm,
And in Australia, it's the land of independence. There's no Starbucks or Dunkin' or Pete's or Tim Hortons. It's
yep.
an independent driven model. And we drink espresso coffee, and we have fantastic, healthy, and interesting food, made to order food, not things
Mm,
that come in frozen in a modified atmospheric packaging plastic
yeah.
bag that you got to put in a microwave or a speed oven to be edible. But I just thought when I was studying, and that was the precursor before I was transferred with the bank I was working with in Melbourne.
Mm,
Um, I had a myopia view on Starbucks, and I just couldn't believe it was worth 90 billion and had such a tremendous market share and had an extraordinary growth rate. I think at that time, back in 2010, Starbucks probably had about 20,000 stores or maybe 18,000 stores, and now
yeah.
they're talking like 35,000 stores. So the
Mhm,
growth back then was phenomenal, but it's just continued to accelerate, particularly with the push into China.
mhm,
So I just thought there must be more people like me that are interested in high quality, not just coffee and food, but really interested in great hospitality and service, where you
mm,
walk in and the proprietor knows your name, face, and order. And I could see that in class fitness. I could see it in the beauty industry with um, uh, beauticians and where people get their manicures and pedicures, and obviously a relationship you have with your barber and hairdresser and
Yep.
the local bar. But I couldn't believe that coffee was seen as really transactional, product
Mm.
led. And I know Starbucks sort of started off being about hospitality focused, particularly coming from the Italian influence, but
Yep.
that was not their play to scale. So that really piqued my interest, and it was through that lens of customer centricity, like what's the need I'm trying to solve for myself, and
Yeah.
for at that stage my girlfriend, now wife, and that's how it evolved.
I love it. So yeah, with a organization so say experience focused, not I mean sell products, but it's really around the experience that kind of ignited this. Where did you look for that first brick and mortar? I know New York, of course, but why New York as well when you're first starting?
Yeah, so I was living in New York,
Yeah.
and I guess it gave me the opportunity to not only evaluate the competitive landscape and the real estate opportunities,
Yep.
but living in New York and being exposed to the cosmopolitan nature, the multiculturalism, the diversity of industry, the capital of commerce and fashion and art. It just gives you this unfair advantage that if you've developed something that's special, you're basically leveraging the biggest brand the world's ever known, NYC. So
Yeah.
if you validated it there, it just gave me enormous confidence that I could potentially scale outside. But in those first couple of years, you just focused on sort of product market fit. And for me, I was working on Park Avenue in a JP Morgan building. And I thought that there has to be, I have to have my daily escape, where we would go as a team and set up our day, talk about what happened yesterday or last night or what have you. And then we'd go again in the afternoon, because
Yeah.
sometimes we wouldn't know what time we'd go home. Like we might have to work really late, might have calls late, might have the client give you their feedback at 6 p.m. and they need it the next morning. So I think those daily rituals were so important, and they were really built around social moments. It
Yeah.
wasn't really that I needed another coffee in the afternoon. It was just socially, like that's what we did to break up the day and connect. And
Yep.
that is really our true north. Like that is what we're about at Bluestone. We're about really making a difference to a local's day. We're about human connection and facilitating that. In Australia, because of this sophistication in the coffee culture,
Hmm.
having great coffee is a ticket to participate. It's not a strategy to win.
Yeah.
To really differentiate in Australia, you need to develop and incubate and um, really, really continue to invest in localized relationships. You
Mm.
do not want customers. You want locals where you know their name, face, and order, where you have this real connection that's intangible, that goes beyond providing them great coffee.
Yeah.
So that's where I really felt myself like I was walking into certain establishments, chain establishments in the coffee space, and they weren't really interested. They weren't remembering me. They weren't interested in really uh, formulating a relationship. They were
Yeah.
very much focused on getting this product out as fast as possible with the least amount of friction. And it's been an extraordinarily successful strategy.
Mm.
But I thought, I'm going to bring something that's more authentic and what I really miss and what I really love about the country I'm from.
Mm.
And I just had this hunch that there must be some more people like me. And if
Yeah.
not, there's probably enough Australians in New York and Australian tourists that could frequent it to give it a chance to be successful. Yeah.
Amazing. So I'm curious, I'm sure the listeners are as well. This part of the story of the transition from banking and then fully going into Bluestone. What does that transition look like, especially like financially? How did you actually launch the store? Were you working at the bank still? What did that look like, that transition?
Yeah. Well, I'm a big believer of staying in the game and iterating. So new ideas. I'm not a big fan of fail fast, fail early. I think I'm more about staying in persistence,
Mm.
because over time you get chances to evolve and iterate and prototype and learn. So for me with Bluestone, I guess I never really thought that I would leave banking. I thought that this is a side experiment. This is just going to be like a really, I think something that's going to bring me enormous intrinsic reward and gratification. I don't know if it's going to generate a great return, but I'd
Yeah.
managed a lot of the downside. I had that financial acumen to be really sure about cost control and how
Hmm.
much invested capital I was going to put in. Um, but I think that if I even went full time at the start, like I probably wasn't the right leader to be full time because of just the nature of my personality and probably how hard I pushed the brand. It needed to
Yeah.
have time. It needed to crawl before it walked, let alone run. And
Yeah.
so I thought the best way to do this is to stay in banking, speak very candidly with my manager, my boss, to get him to understand it and support it and know that I won't compromise my banking role and the responsibilities I have there.
Hmm.
But I it worked out really well because there was no financial pressure on the business. I was able to continue to earn an income and meet my family's requirements,
Mm.
and let the business just flourish. And so I actually didn't leave banking until we had 12 locations. And at
Wow.
that time, it was probably a little bit too much. My boss did come to me and say, "Listen, we're at a bit of an inflection point here. You either got to jump in or jump out." And it was a pretty honest chat, and he was spot on. And he's been a great mentor as well. I'm so fortunate in my entire banking career to have
Mm.
wonderful line managers and bosses. So then I went full time in the middle of 2016. So we'd already been operating for 3 years.
Wow.
And at that stage, yeah, the compensation was going to be a lot less, but it was enough to survive, and it was
Yeah.
enough to pay the rent in New York City. So it was a sensible balance. And I think just looking back at it now, like it was probably a professionally mature decision that I got right. And
Yeah.
you can add an enormous amount of distraction to your business idea if personally, like, your financial situation is adding a whole lot of other stress. Like
Yep.
you're not going to have the clarity of thought, and you're not going to have um, the ability to sort of solve real business challenges if your personal life's spiraling out of control, or you've got pressure from your partner, or you feel like
Yep.
you can't pay the rent or pay your credit card bill. So
For
it
sure.
worked out really well. And I'm a big fan of like proving the concept and challenging the value proposition without going all in. Like I just these big bets and putting your life on hold. Like I had a great career in banking, and I
Yeah.
wasn't necessarily going to just jump out for something that has some momentum. I think I needed to get to critical mass before I decide, yeah, like let's make a switch here and change.
Mm.
And that was the right decision. And so for 3 years it was a juggle. But as I said, I had that experience previously of going to
Yeah.
university while being a professional sportsman, and then going to university while I was working in banking and finance. So it worked out well.
Wow. Yeah, I must say that's a very impressive balance, first of all. And then leading up to this next question is so logistically, you didn't really have much experience, you said, in coffee itself, but where were you sourcing? I'm not sure if this changed or evolved as you got more locations, but sourcing products themselves.
Yeah, well, what's really interesting and what was a huge advantage was the fact that I was an outsider to the industry, because it gives you this liberation around ideas, and you are not influenced by precedent or rules that you were told that you must follow this way. You can look at it through which the way I did was through an obsessive customer centric lens. So
Mm.
I had this sort of financial acumen and experience there working with a lot of companies, but then just this customer centricity, and that's what I was trying to solve. That was the problem. It was the experience that was inconsistent with what I was used to in Australia and what I thought was really terrific. So, as it relates to like learning about the business and then sourcing products and putting it all together, it's just about asking questions and iterations. And the thing that I really was confident about was the taste profile, like what I wanted the coffee to taste like, and I needed it to work really well with milk, because the vast majority of coffee drinkers or espresso coffee drinkers
Mm.
have some form of milk, whether dairy or non-dairy, and whether it's a lot of milk like a latte or a little bit of milk like a macchiato, they still have milk.
Yeah.
Same, So I just was really, really focused on coffee that would blend really well with milk, and really the notes I was looking for were big chocolate and hazelnut sort of notes, and that dark roast that is not bitter, but just is really palatable.
Yeah.
And primarily, like our beans for that profile come from South America, from Brazil, from Colombia, and then we have chance to sort of put in the blend some more unique flavors just to add a little bit more aftertaste, or an impression on the palate. So we
Mhm.
will often add a little bit of Central American, sort of Guatemalan, or some African, some Kenyan or Ethiopian coffee. So
Yep.
yeah, but like our blend is primarily in the beans where we've sourced, so primarily from direct relationships we have with farmers
Mhm.
in South America.
I love it. Talking on then expansion, first of all, just the way you were able to balance while in banking and having 12 locations is crazy. I'm curious to hear expansion strategy. What region wise, where did you look to expand and why? So primarily New York, LA. Um, what did you look for in early days?
Yeah, no, great question. The first geographic market we went to outside of New York was Philadelphia. And we
Yep.
chose that because Philly's a big enough city with critical mass, and it was so accessible to New York. It was the right time zone. You could get there in an hour and change on the train. You could drive there. Uh, and, it just made a lot of sense. Our core customer was working in there. There was enough sort of professional services buildings that where they employ young people and a lot of graduates that were our focus core customers. So
Mhm.
a lot of them also visit New York, and then you suddenly have you have the chance to catch up. So that was the focus, and after that, like we expanded to DC, and we were really focused on the Eastern Seaboard before we went to the West Coast, and we entered in San Francisco first. And
Mm.
San Francisco has a bit of a revered coffee culture, particularly this third, fourth wave
Yeah.
blue bottles from San Francisco, and they were probably our closest peer in the coffee space. Obviously, Pete's are from San Francisco or from the West Coast, Starbucks from the West Coast. So
Yep.
we just thought Coffee Bean and Tea Leaves from the West Coast. So we thought, why don't we enter San Francisco and really and really try and make an impression and try and tell people that hey, we've got something really good going on here, and
Yep.
we're not only do we have great coffee, but we've got great food and we've got
Mm.
great hospitality. So straddling the coast, it's a tough play. It's an exciting one, that's for sure, and it can be a real catalyst to your brand awareness and growth. But it's logistically very challenging because the
Yeah.
tyranny of distance, 3 hours time zone, the labor laws are so different,
Mm.
uh, and yeah, you don't have as much sort of, I guess, operational synergy because
Mm.
you could have someone who oversees parts of New York also oversees Philly because it's easy to get to. You can go and do it in a day without breaking a sweat. But the
Yep.
West Coast, not possible. So we were just really confident in the value proposition. We had the requisite level of capital, and we just thought there's a lot of Aussies there too that are probably going to get around us, and they've been really the tastemakers. They introduced Bluestone to a lot of their friends, so we thought, yeah, let's give it a go. And it's exhilarating and exciting, but it comes with a lot of challenges, that's for sure. And
Mhm.
you know, I'm I'm proud we did it, but equally, if we didn't go to the West Coast and just continued to focus on the East Coast, the Northeast, I think that could have worked really well too.
Yep, definitely. Kind of wrapping up here slowly. I'm curious. So you have on your background right there, that's one of the locations. And then the location I've been into was actually attached to pretty much a skyscraper. It was at the bottom of large offices. I'm curious, physical building wise, it's very unique locational location. What's kind of the inspiration behind that?
Yeah, well, the location behind me in the screens cafe in Los Altos, so in the Bay Area in Silicon Valley, in Northern California. But yeah, no two Bluestone lanes look the same, and we do have two concepts,
Mhm.
very similar but slightly different use case. So the
Yep.
coffee shop model is really focused on being an amenity to a building, focused on a captive audience, and that was the big play pre-COVID. We had
Mm.
great predictability about demand. We knew people were going to fill up that office building
Yep.
every Monday through Friday, and they were all going to drink. A lot of them were going to drink coffee or tea or hot chocolate or come for a cold pressed juice, and they'd have avocado toast, or they'd have pastry, or they'd have something else. So,
Yep.
um, that was the play there, and very much focused on very large office buildings, at least 500,000 square feet,
Mm.
typically over 1 million square feet. And then the other sort of use case is residential areas where we offer the larger cafes, which are more a dining experience,
Yeah.
broader menu. Typically, 90% of transactions are two or more people. So we've never been built around this laptop, culture and hanging out in the space, you know, working on my laptop. We've really been about bringing people together
Mm.
and being a catalyst to drive that connection. So We launched the first cafe in West Village in
Hmm.
mid 2014, and that's where we've continued to grow. Since COVID, particularly in some of these commuter suburbs,
Yeah.
inner suburban sort of rings that where people used to commute in every day, but now they're only commuting in 2 days or 3 days.
Yeah.
So it's great for families. It's great for big catch ups with a group of friends. It's great to visit after you go for a run or go to the gym or drop the kids off at school.
Mhm.
And really, that was modeled on those days where we would go running with my wife and we'd catch up, or running with my mates, and
Yep.
then we'd sit down and uh, have a flat white in a porcelain mug, a latte in a glass, a big brekkie with an avocado smash, and read the papers back to front. And that's really was the inspiration, and just that feeling of being part of the community, and great service and great atmosphere, great music.
Yeah.
It's just addictive, and yeah, I'm really proud of what we've been able to do and scale that. And now we serve about 80,000 people a week, so it
Wow.
has resonated, and you get a lot of tangibility when you're in hospitality and retail. You get feedback on the spot,
Yeah.
but you get enormous reward when it goes well, and people tell you, and you see it with your own eyes.
That's incredible. Well, I like to conclude each episode with this. If you can share one piece of advice with an aspiring entrepreneur, maybe something you've learned or regret along the way, what would you say that would be?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question, and
Mhm.
probably got a few different answers. But what I always get asked about is that people that are chasing an idea, and they always get concerned about the competition. They get concerned about sharing it. They want to keep it very secretive, like
Yeah.
they've cracked the code to solving something that no one else has worked out. And the reality is like that sort of no one owns a good idea. Execution's everything. And in fact, like Reid Hoffman sort of said a derivation of that, and that's really helped me. Like, lots of people have great ideas about building businesses or building a coffee company and having better quality coffee and focused around service, but execution is everything. So
Yeah.
I don't think it's really about the art of the originality of the idea. Most ideas are just iterations of something that's already been done before.
Hmm.
But the execution is what sets people apart. And the execution, in the case of hospitality, which has limited intellectual property other than your culture, which is really your people,
Yeah.
it's how the team interacts. It's how they are so selfless to make sure that our locals come in and have a great time. So, that would be my piece of advice. Don't get too caught up with the idea. Like, everything's about execution, and that's where the rubber hits the road, and you learn whether you've got a real business or not. And there's plenty of silly ideas that are executed really well and become amazing businesses.
Amazing. Well, Nick, thank you so much for joining me today. And to the listeners out there, make sure to check out Bluestone Lane at bluestonelane.com.